So again, I'm Dr. Paul at Online Chiropractic Marketing Systems, open 77 chiropractic offices in 20 states. And we see over 600,000 patient visits, 30,000 new patients. And what we're going to do is, again, my focus is I specifically use consulting, marketing, and training services for chiropractors to help maximize their practice, but not for the sake of the practice. It's really to increase the lifestyle, the passion, and the dreams. So that's really what I'm doing here. That's the focus of my purpose in what I'm doing in my life relative to this business. So let's go ahead and pick back up. And what we're going to talk about is motivation. We started on motivation a little bit. And we're going to talk about two categories of motivation. We're going to talk about the patient, we're going to talk about patient motivation. We're going to talk about your motivation. And remember, the reason we're going to talk about is when I work with chiropractors, there's overwhelmingly three major factors that I see problems. Number one, and none of it is clinical chiropractic. None of it. The three reasons that I see chiropractors not achieving their full potential is, number one, is their knowledge. They don't have the business knowledge of the four categories of exchanging your time for money, which is get new business, know how to get new business, know how to get it to stay, dealing with fees and overhead. Those are the four categories that maximize your unit of time for money, which is the first level of making money. The second level is leveraging your money, and the third level is leveraging your time. Although the second, third levels, all principles are based on the first. So we're going to talk a little bit about number one was knowledge, number two is motivation, and number three is discipline. And, the word motivation can be overlooked, can be trite, and I see that often. So we're going to take a deep dive here tonight. We're going to do some interacting, and we're going to do some deep diving here to kind of do some self-exploration. And so it really starts with, let me just make sure everybody can hear. Everybody can hear, hands up. Everybody here, hands up. Okay, sounds okay. All right. We're gonna go into a little bit of material, and then we're gonna do some interaction relative to this material. And I'm gonna share with you some of my personal experiences, personally, how this material relates, not just to me personally, but to my training when I was training doctors. And so this is the single largest topic, because it's going to deal with why you do what you do, why the staff does what they do, and why the patients do what they do, or any other marketing you're going to do, whether it's why the attorneys do what they do. So a basic understanding of subconscious human motivation is huge. More importantly, for yourself. I frequently find so many chiropractors who are just not in touch with their reality and what motivates them or what does not motivate them. And I'll share with you really clear examples of what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and get started when we talk about motivation. And said the first thing that we're going to look at is why you do what you do. Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And so and that will be the single largest determining factor of the success of your practice. In other words, the application of business marketing principles is your why. The weaker your why, the less effective you'll be, the less successful you'll be. The stronger your why, the higher the likelihood of your success and your business. So, and we'll define weak and strong essentially when we talk about the why. So there's different motivating models. Most of you have heard of Sigmund Freud. Well, that's a motivating model. That's a psychological motivating model. There's other motivating models. The most common motivating model was written by Abraham Maslow in the 50s as a psychologist. And I suggested that you read his book, Human Motivation. He wrote a book called Human Motivation. And by the way, Donald Trump, who you might be aware of is highly successful, said the single greatest thing you could learn is human motivation, because that's what business is. It's about people and what motivates people. And the book is called Human Motivation. And he wrote a discourse essentially on the comprehensive study of individual motivation, which cumulatively was cultural and societal motivation. And he called that the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in that men will naturally, the human race will naturally do some things stronger than others without any direction. These are just natural preponderances. Now, wouldn't it be nice if you could tap into your natural drive? Wouldn't it be nice if you could tap into your market's natural drive? How much more easy would life be if you had the ability and knowledge of how to do that? Well, I'm going to share with you what I did and how I did, and why is it that after I made $1 million a year, why is it I kept opening offices? Was it because of the money? No, it had absolutely nothing to do with the money. And I'll share with you exactly what that had to do with. And hopefully you can translate it into yourself, or reposition maybe, or rethink about how maybe you're seeing your business and your life. So when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the very first are the primordial needs. Those are, and you're going to hear this a lot in our discussions of marketing, because marketing is motivation. And so some of the very core concepts, and we're going to go into application of these concepts, is the first human motivation are the physiological needs, survival as an organism. So you're going to do what you can to survive. And he identified core factors. And it was survival was food, oxygen, sex, a shelter. Those were the core factors of motivation. Nothing else mattered until those were satisfied. Now, again, before I go too far, I want to be real clear in identifying, you've heard me say this before, but I want to tie it all together and then personalize it to you. How does this relate to you? So let's tie it together. So we're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then we talk about pain and pleasure motivation. And generally speaking, we always talk about 80% of why people will do what they do is called pain-based motivation. Well, that is directly tied into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you do not have oxygen, food, shelter, physiological sex, you will put those to the top of the line. They go to the front of line in your priorities, in your time, and your money. That's where you will go. Now, you can control these. If you're aware of these, you can personally tap into them, if you're aware of them, for yourself, your staff, your patients. You can start controlling motivation around you instead of just being vague and indifferent to it. So we're going to cover that tonight. We're going to go into that in great detail. So the first and so we talked about the pain motivation being, there's pain motivation, and of course there's present pain, future pain, present pleasure, future pleasure, and curiosity. So those are very vague general categories. Let's go ahead and tie into individuals, cultures, and societies now. So if we talk about the primary physiological needs, those are pain-based needs. In other words, it doesn't have to be physical pain. It could be emotional pain, psychological pain. There's many different forms of pain besides just physical pain. Be highly aware of what I just said. I am not just referring to physical pain when it comes to motivation. So we talk about the motivating factors of the primary needs. Those are pain-based. If you don't have them, they hurt. And they hurt to the core. They hurt enough that they can kill you. That's how high motivating and pain motivating those needs are. So the second, after you've satiated your food, oxygen, shelter, then those kind of go to the wayside. And what becomes important now is now security in your environment. Now, security can again come in many ways. It can come in physical security, emotional security, psychological security, financial security. So I'm not just talking about one category when I talk about pain or security. So be highly aware of that likewise. And a little example there, or as we move along, is if you don't have a primary need of food, shelter, oxygen, you will challenge your security. You will do things that you would not ordinarily do to get and to accomplish your primary needs. And that might be crime. That may include crime. It might include working 3 jobs. So there's many things that you will do to get that taken care of. And then, of course, then there's security. And then after there's security, that's the bad news now. There's good and bad news that happens here. After your physiological needs are met and your security is met, now enter the laws of thermodynamics. These are natural laws of nature. And I strongly recommend you put these to the top of your mindset and become highly aware of natural laws. And so how do the natural laws of thermodynamics play into motivation? Well, here's how. The natural laws of thermodynamics, vaguely speaking, are there's a fixed amount of energy in the universe. Number one. Number two, that energy is constantly being used. Number three, it's being constantly being used into a more of an entropy state. In other words, there's constantly, and one of the simple ways that I've heard somebody explain it, it's like playing a baseball game. You are forced to play. You are in the laws of the universe as a natural human being. You have to play the game. You cannot remove yourself from the laws of thermodynamics. Number two is you have to participate. So you have to play the game. You have to participate. And the law of entropy. What is the law of entropy? The law of entropy means you're going to lose. And a personal example is how many times when you don't put organization or energy into something, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's new patients, retention. It doesn't matter if it's your bathroom, your bedroom. How many times will that naturally progress and get better on its own? When you don't put energy into your bathroom, does it naturally get cleaner or more dirty? When you don't clean your car, does it naturally get more clean or dirty? See, those are natural laws. And so how does that apply to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and human motivation? Well, the second highest need was security. Well, the next highest need is socialization. So after there's survival and socialization, then there's security. Do you care about socialization if you can't feed yourself or you're having trouble feeding yourself or putting a roof over your head? No, you don't. These are priorities. Now, after you can do that, then you want security. Do you care about your socialization if you're not secure mentally, physically, financially, or emotionally? Do you care about socialization? Not really. No, you don't. These are priorities. Then after your physiological needs have been met, your security needs have been met, financial, psychological, emotional, then the next event is socialization, because we're social animals. Now, here's where it flips. That is not a pain-based motivation. Soon as you go up to the third hierarchy of need, it is now a pleasure-based. You do not need socialization to survive. To thrive, you need it. You don't need it to survive. And so now it becomes pleasure-based. So how much time or money you're willing to spend for the socialization now becomes very important. Very important. And then, of course, after the socialization, there's the materialism, things that you need to make your life easier. And then the last category is what's called self-actualization. And those directly correspond with the 4 other categories of motivation, why you will do what you do. The very first thing is money. The worst level of motivation is money. but you will do things for money to get out of survival or to stabilize your security. You will do that. Patients will do this. Staff will do this. Personal injury attorneys will do this. Everybody you talk to in business and personal life, this is how it works to some degree. Knowing it and understanding it, you can actually put forces, natural forces, to work in your behalf. So after that is, and then so the lowest form is money, personal gain. There's money is the lowest form that you'll do something. The next one is personal gain. The next one is conviction. Conviction comes in two categories: a personal emotional experience, or a significant other who has a personal emotional experience. That will create, so it's either personal emotional experience, you or a high loved one, or desire over time. And then the last category is self-actualization, and that comes with a sense of duty. Duty is beyond you. That's when it's about your child. That's when it's about your country. That's when it's about your God. That's the sense of duty. So that's the hierarchy of why you will or won't do things, where you will spend your time and money. So if it's only about the money and you're not paying attention to personal gain or conviction or duty, you will be operating at a very low level. You won't attain very much because of the natural laws of thermodynamics, unless you're in survival. When you're in survival, you'll do a lot of things for money. And as a matter of fact, you should do things for money because money will help take you out of survival. So, having said that, how does that play into your success as a business owner? Well, every day you have things to do to run a business. The reasons you do them will determine A, whether you do them or not, B, how well you do them, and C, how effective you do them. If it's just about the money and you're doing something, say a new patient marketing program, and it's just about the money and you're out of survival and you're in security, it will be one of the weakest, most pathetic marketing plans you will ever do. You can almost be guaranteed it will crash and burn. It probably will not get off the floor. You can almost be guaranteed it. Now, if it's about a sense of duty, in other words, there's a higher calling, it's not about personal gain and it's not about money. It's about impacting the world around you because of a conviction or a duty. Then chances are you will persevere with great vigor. Great vigor is how you'll persevere. And you see this routinely throughout society. You can almost look at anybody on the surface who's done well, and you will see some motivating factors that definitely correspond to what I'm talking about here. So having said that, we're going to be paying a lot of attention to, number one, your motivation. First, understanding where you're at, because you may not be aware, but you may have a motivation problem. That may be the problem. It may not be a knowledge problem. It may not be a skill set problem. It could flat out be a motivation problem. And I'll give you an example. One of the worst clients to deal with is the client who is making enough money to pay for their survival, their security, and a decent lifestyle, but they're not making enough money to live the quality of life or a above average lifestyle that they thought they would live as a doctor. And that number that I typically see, that is a very difficult number to work with clients, is usually around the 100 to 150 patient visit mark. 100 to 140 patient visits. They're typically making enough money to live in a decent house, have a good car, nice neighborhood. In other words, survival's taken care of. They're in a good security situation. But here's what they typically have. It's called Big Hat, No Cattle. There was a book written by a Dr. Stanley. It's called The Millionaire Next Door. I suggest you read it. It's a research history of the characteristics of millionaires, how and why they became millionaires. And what happens is, and it's especially prevalent with doctors, they live above their means relative to their income, so they're constantly borderline, but they're living a good enough life with their car and their house and their being a member of the club, the country club or whatever, but they have no residual income, little investments, and no assets. Everything's leveraged to the hilt. That is a common doctor problem, and Dr. Stanley tabbed it, big hat, no cattle. And when I deal with people like that, one of the first things I have to do is realize that it doesn't matter how much knowledge I give them, how many sources I give them. If I don't tap into their motivation, that client typically will not do very well at all. The typical client who will naturally do well, and I explain how all this works, is somebody who is to some degree in survival, in motivation. Now, I'm going to talk about 3 types of motivation. Internal motivation, external motivation, and circumstantial motivation. And the difference between each and which is most important and how to impact and control it to some degree. You especially need to know this. Number 1, for yourself. Where are you at? And acknowledging where you're at and the steps required to change your motivation. Number 2, especially if you're going to be a leader with your staff, especially a leader with associates. You have to be aware of how to interpret motivation in people. When you hire associates or open other offices and you pick somebody that has low internal motivation, you will almost always not do well with that doctor. There's several factors, but that is a key component. And I will explicitly explain that in great detail with examples and stories. So it's an awareness of how this all works and its application of how it all works. So when we say, what are you doing and why are you doing it? You've heard the story, and I'll give you the bastardized version. Somebody sees somebody laying bricks, and they ask, what are you doing? The first person says, I'm laying bricks. They ask another person, what are you doing? He says, I'm building a house. He asks the next person, says, I'm building a cathedral for people to worship. All 3 of them were physically doing the exact same thing. What was the difference? How they perceived what they were doing, which affected their motivation. That was what the difference was. Now, what we're going to talk about tonight is some natural motivating factors. I'm going to point out amongst you what I have seen as natural motivating factors, natural demotivating factors, and then I'm going to show you the formula that I used and that I continue to use today to affect my motivation and what and how I do. But it's my choice now. I'm not a victim of circumstances. I choose where I go, how I go, and when I go. And I'm going to show you the exact formula that I use. So when we talk about motivation, we said we're starting off, why are you doing what you're doing? And so last time we met, we said for you to maximize your time for money in your office, we had you take your average patient visits times what you think you could see physically, emotionally, psychologically, week in and week out. And that would be maximizing your time for money with patient visits. And so that was a number that we came to. And then I said, why, the big question, why are you seeing patients? And that was the big question. Why? Are you laying bricks or are you building a cathedral? Are you doing it for the money or are you doing it for personal gain or are you doing it for conviction or are you doing it for a sense of duty? Now, some of these are more natural that have happened, but I'll share with you what my experience is in interpreting motivation with doctors, affecting motivation with doctors, and taking your awareness from an unconscious, subconscious level to a conscious level of motivation. And also how you can impact the people around you, because you can actually do the exact same thing and demotivate motivated people, motivated staff. You can demotivate them by what you say and do. You can also take an average motivated person and make them highly motivated. I call that the warrior, making warriors of your employees, not employees.